In this session, I've got a presentation for you on cybersecurity, the pros and cons in the hybrid cloud. Are you ready? Greetings fellow YouTubers, welcome to the channel. Andy here, so nice to see you. And I gotta say, 50k, wow. I gotta take my hat off to you guys. You guys are a bunch of stars. I really appreciate your support, every single one of you, no matter where you are in the world. And I'm delighted to hear your stories that my channel, you're finding it of use. All right. Hey, now this week I thought I would do something a little bit different. I've just finished teaching and I did a little seminar on cybersecurity and the hybrid world. So many of our businesses are currently in hybrid, which means we're connected to Microsoft 365 or Azure Active Directory, and on premises we're running Active Directory. So I thought I'd take this short presentation and we'll talk about what are the pros and the cons. We'll talk about how hackers actually can get into your system, how ransomware can do damage, but also I'm going to talk about what you can do in order to defend against those attacks. All right, this is really quite interesting and I really hope that you enjoy it. All right, now in this session, I've also got a full demo of Cloud Sync. So rather than using Azure AD Connect, I'm going to look at the Cloud Sync product as well. All right. Questions, comments, of course, get them down below. And if you've not subscribed, then come on, click on that subscribe button up there, ring that bell, and you won't miss out on a notification of another video. And fantastic to have you on board today. All right, so without any further ado, I think it's about time we jump in with this nice presentation. Hope you enjoy. We're going to have, I've got a little session now. This is cybersecurity and the hybrid cloud. What we've seen in the last few years is that, of course, there's been a massive shift to people working from home. And also there's been a massive shift in the uptake of cloud. But a lot of companies still have masses of infrastructure on premises. We're seeing a huge push and a kind of almost like a pressuring push from the vendors to move their content into the cloud. So of course, because of COVID and because of these changes, criminals can obviously see potential advantages here. So things like the hybrid cloud solutions are becoming a major focal point for hackers now. And again, as it says, things like skill dominance. So I'm seeing folks coming out of school, out of college, out of university, who are highly skilled in the cloud, but when they go on premises and they just suddenly discover, hey, we've got Azure Active Directory here, we've got Azure AD Connect, we've got Active Directory, we've got Exchange on premises, they haven't a clue. So that skills shortage is potentially an issue. Also, many organizations don't actually know that they've been hacked. So we've mentioned it in many of my sessions that, you know, zero trust, Microsoft's principles of zero trust. One of the things is you trust no one, you verify everything. We've said that something like 70%, 75% of companies don't even know that they've been hacked. So again, we have to move forward and kind of overcome that. So you can see here, one or more organizations, 1/3 of organizations have been attacked or experienced ransomware in the last few years. And, you know, just because you think it's not bothered us for a while, it's going to go away, it's not going to go away. It's still here. And what COVID and the last few years has shown us, in fact, there's a whole bunch of new ransomware coming out. And it's actually pretty cruel because it's not just targeting on-premises systems like Active Directory, but it's also potentially targeting backups as well, which makes it an even crueler attack. So when we talk about the threat actors in 22 and 23, you can see that they really kind of fall into a number of different categories. So hacktivists, of course, they've got a point to make. They want to use network exploits. They might be script kiddies. They might be, activists, the Extinction Rebellion, things like that. They've got a point to make. Cyber criminals, of course, do it for the money, pure and simple. Whether it's a phishing attack, which is essentially just a drive-by attack, ransomware is beautiful. It's the perfect delivery system. Okay, encrypt all your content, you pay us the ransom, and we'll decrypt it for you. And in many cases now, we're actually seeing that they're not doing that. This is the tricky one to spot, the malicious insider, the guy that's a little hacked off, he didn't get promoted, he didn't get the pay rise that you got, or the company is merged with another company and he's been laid off. So these are trusted insiders. These are harder to spot, but it's nice to see that technology is finally moving on in order to defend against this. And what we're seeing is, of course, because of Russia, Ukraine, and so on, we're seeing a huge rise in nation-state actors as well. So things like, obviously, Russia's doing a lot of cyber attacks, but we're also seeing a lot of espionage as well. So things like nation-state actors looking to gain, for example, financial advantages, stealing secrets and designs and so on. So cyber threats essentially are evolving, and they're evolving by using different types of technologies. So typically, as we've moved through the years, these cyber threats are becoming more and more sophisticated. So when we talk about designing a hybrid cloud, how do we do it? What's the best way that we can actually do this? Well, of course, if you're on premises and all your information is, for example, on site, so on premises here, starting from right to left here, then of course you are responsible for absolutely everything. Okay, so everything, including the infrastructure, the networking, information, protecting, everything. Then you've got obviously infrastructure as a service. So you might say, hey, I'm going to hire, rather than purchasing very expensive networking and server infrastructure, I'm going to rent some racks in a data center. So, hey, infrastructure as a service. Then we've got platform as a service. So platform as a service, Azure, for example, is one of them. Again, you can see more and more of it is moving to the cloud. And so the purple bits there is what the cloud provider is providing for us. Okay, so it's your applications, your identity solution, accounts, and so on. And of course, what we've got at the far right-hand side are the likes of, let's say, Microsoft 365. So Microsoft 365 is software as a service. So all the infrastructure, all the networking, all the physical side of everything is taken care of for us by the cloud provider. Up at the top, of course, it's your information, it's your data. You might be able to manage your devices, your PCs, your mobile devices, and so on. And again, we've tools like Intune, Azure Active Directory, and so on. Typically in this scenario, you'll also use what we call identity as a service as well. Microsoft Azure, for example, Azure Active Directory is the #1 directory service in the world right now. So unlike the on-premises version of Active Directory in the past, which required a huge infrastructure, so a lot of replication, maybe multi-sites, a lot of work, all of that's taken care of us, for us now in the cloud. So essentially, trust is everything. right? So trust is a nice word, but we need to verify that trust. We need to verify the trust through identity. We need to verify it through applications and also through devices. So is that person, that application, that device, who they appear to be? We also talk about modernizing the infrastructure of security. So if an incident takes place, I need to know about it immediately. And also establishing a modern perimeter. So tools like Microsoft 365, EMNS, Enterprise Mobility and Security. You've got encryption. So you've got encryption in transit, you've got encryption at rest in the form of BitLocker, and you've also got encryption with emails, for example, Secure MIME, SMIME, and so on. So designing the hybrid cloud on the right-hand side here, you might have Active Directory. You might still have Active Directory on premises. Again, this is connected to Azure Active Directory. And you can see the little circle in the middle represents Azure AD Connect. Azure AD Connect could potentially become a focal point for the bad guys, right? And you can see that Azure is so powerful because it connects to HR systems, external identities. It talks to everybody. You can potentially see how Active Directory and that connector could be a potential weak area. Sorry. So when we connect to Active Directory, we use Azure AD Connect, and users can authenticate using password hash sync, pass-through authentication, or federated authentication, for example, ADFS, and so on. So password hash sync basically works like this. The user signs in when basically we have an on-premises Active Directory. And when Azure AD Connect is linked to Active Directory, the user accounts, group accounts, contacts, those properties are replicated into the cloud. All the attributes of the object are replicated with the exception of a password. The password is hashed. It's a one-way cryptographic hash, and that then goes through a second cryptographic hash. That second hash is then what we call salted, okay? And that means there's just a random number thrown on the end. So in essence, the user's password is never transmitted over the wire. So when the user authenticates, it's this cached credential, it's the cached, what's the word, if you will, the password hash that's compared with the password hash in the cloud. And if they're both the same, the user gets authenticated. Now, you can use as many different authentication methods as you wish, but I honestly believe that this is one of the most secure because that password is never transmitted. And you can see here how that works. So again, uses an MD4 hash, and then it's run through a secondary hashing algorithm, and it's salted, okay? Now, I'm very pleased to say there has been no occurrence of any attacks that have been successful on this method. So technically wise, this is one of the most safest methods. The other type of authentication is pass-through authentication. So pass-through uses OAuth or open authentication. And essentially the idea is that rather than authenticating the user is already authenticated on the user's device. So when the user authenticates, it essentially passes the Kerberos value over to Azure Active Directory. So that's the reason why it's called pass-through. Another authentication, and again, this could also be a potential weakness in security, is ADFS. ADFS has been traditionally used to authenticate users for single sign-on purposes. So again, SSO, single sign-on, you don't want your users to log off and log back on again. This is great. But the problem is that traditional ADFS, you install an ADFS server, that's a single point of failure. So you can see here that we've got 3 ADFS servers in a server farm with a load balancer. And of course, it's not considered good etiquette to authenticate outside your network directly into an ADFS server. So what the heck, let's use a proxy server. In fact, let's have 2. And you're looking at this and you're thinking, whoa, this is really expensive. And that was the problem all along. So Microsoft now consider this not just a potential security flaw, but also a real weakness in security as well. All right. And again, this is now classed as legacy technology. Now, the good thing is, if I was ever asked what are the only reasons to have ADFS still on site, one of the answers that you might come back with is smart cards. So I've got a smart card login with a digital certificate. Well, the good thing is now Microsoft supports that. So you can now have certificate-based authentication in Azure AD. So federation at what cost? And here's a classic example of an attack that happened a couple of years ago, the SolarWinds hack. I'm sure you remember that. So with all of these hybrid pitfalls, how can we avoid them? What are some of the tips and tricks that we can use in order to avoid these? Well, you could, in many cases, you've got too many users on premises with admin permissions. Many of these technologies are aging technologies. They're using older protocols. So again, they potentially have vulnerabilities. Too many active stale accounts. So in many cases, when we were using Active Directory, we never bothered about deleting old accounts. We just left them in place. And also poor auditing practices as well. So with poor auditing, again, hackers could come in, they could remove audit logs, they could remove evidence, and we simply didn't have the skills or the infrastructure to manage it. And also, in the early years of hybrid, perhaps it was badly implemented. Again, this increases the attack surface of an organization. But there are definite benefits. Hybrid connectivity. It's easy to do. It fully integrates. It extends existing on-premises. But again, the cons are, we have issues. The cloud has many different portals. There is no one portal to rule them all in a Microsoft product. And if you go to msportals.io, you'll see that there are gazillions of portals there. It can be confusing. So weakness begins on premises with Active Directory. So what are some of the things that we can do to improve? Yeah. So, as I said, aging authentication protocols. So NTLM, the NT LAN Manager protocol, is an old protocol from Windows NT. So again, it's been upgraded over the years. But if you haven't changed the LMC or the LM compatibility level in the registry, then you're still using the old version. So you need to change this, otherwise you're vulnerable. Authentication protocols. Again, Kerberos has also been updated over the years. And to be honest, Kerberos does a fantastic job. So Kerberos, of course, uses the KDC, the Key Distribution Center, aka the domain controller. So when the user authenticates, they request a TGT or ticket granting ticket. The server looks through its list of users and says, hey, yes, I've got a user here called Andy. He is a member of the sales team. He is authorized to use the network. Here's a ticket. So it issues the user with a session ticket, a TGT. Now, if the user wants to access a resource, again, they need to present that ticket. The Kerberos server will say, yep, you're authorized to use Exchange or SharePoint, updates the ticket, and then the user then requests access to the resource server. The downside is, of course, that all the servers in the infrastructure need to be Kerberized. In other words, they need to understand that authentication protocol. So Kerberos clients, they are mutually authenticated. Various operating systems, including Windows Server 2019, 2022, support this. The good thing is that Kerberos tickets have a limited time period, and this avoids replay. Passwords are never sent over the network unencrypted, but it can be potentially vulnerable to weak or repeated passwords. Remember, this was a technology that was written for another age. So what about different attack examples of Active Directory? How can we attack Active Directory? Well, a common one is this, of course. So if you've got remote desktop protocol open on a server or on the firewall on your network, this is always the first port of call that hackers will come in on. All right. They'll use scanning tools like Nmap to discover resources on that 3389 port. So definitely make sure that that port is closed. Now, if you are using Azure, of course, if you've got virtual machines in Azure, again, there are alternative solutions there to avoid that. Another thing that you definitely want to disable is the link local multicast name resolution, or LLMNR. So this was a protocol. It was a name resolution protocol that used to query DNS. It uses port 5335. Again, the problem is there was very few inbuilt protections to defend against unauthorized nodes from authorizing claims from anyone. So they could just say that they were anyone. So again, this is something that should definitely be stopped. And you can see here that there's a little piece at the bottom there to tell you how to do that. One workaround, of course, is MFA. Multi-factor authentication would kill passwords. So even if you're using passwords, and if MFA would kill password attacks by up to 99%. So definitely think about that. Another attack is the LLMNR name poisoning using a little tool called Responder. And again, so I've got access to the network. I can simply plug in a USB or drop it via mail, but essentially Responder will then answer to network queries. An unsuspecting victim system will then happily share its NTLM hash. So the NTLM hash, of course, allows the user then to replay that hash and potentially get access to the system. And again, it's all based on passwords. Okay, so if you're using MFA, it would thwart this type of attack. Another one is, of course, once hackers get into your network, they are looking for persistence. So they want to obviously elevate their own privileges. So, of course, service accounts are great for this as well. Many of these can be poorly implemented. And again, hackers can easily elevate their privileges by using just simple hacks like this. One of my favorite ones, well, be careful of this. Be careful of overprivileged and unmanaged service accounts. So again, make sure that you disable any old service accounts. Don't give hackers an opportunity here. And my personal favorite, this is Kerbroasting. So Kerbroasting allows hackers to easily elevate their privileges. So most hackers will come in nice and quiet, nice and gentle. Maybe they've stolen a user's credentials. They'll come in as a regular user and they'll use tools like this to easily elevate their privileges. Once they do that and they get admin privileges, it's basically game over, really, isn't it? Okay, so again, you have to defend against this type of attack. So those are the attacks. How can we reduce your organization's attack surface? What are some of the things that we can do? Well, always have a solid defense in-depth strategy. Okay, and ultimately at the top of the chain is you have to have good security policies, procedures, and awareness. So I'm sure many of us go through security awareness training, and that's so important because security awareness training educates users on this is the why we do it this way. Things like physical security. So again, we've talked about the physical security of data centers. That's all managed for us, but you have to be aware of the physical security of your on-premises systems. The perimeter, things like firewalls, VPNs, packet filtering, the host machines, making sure that they're updated, the latest OS, the latest builds, the latest patches. Again, things like Defender, making sure that you've got antivirus, anti-malware, and it's all up to date. The apps as well, make sure the apps use single sign-on. Make sure they're OAuth-based apps. They're not just apps that are relying on passwords. And of course, make sure that your data is fundamentally secure. So when we talk about hardening Active Directory, clean up stale objects. Don't use Microsoft a few years ago suggested that we use complex passwords. Don't use complex passwords. It doesn't really matter if you use the @ symbols or the $ symbols and things like that. Hackers know those things. Okay, there are a million hacking tools out there. Louvcrack, Cain and Abel, John the Ripper. These are hacking tools that have been around for 25, 30 years, and they still work. Okay. Don't let employees have local admin access on workstations, lock down service accounts. All of these, common sense. Remember, multi-factor authentication kills password attacks by up to 99%. Why not relocate your DCs? If you have to have Active Directory, why not relocate them to the cloud? Okay, these are critical servers. They'll be protected by the vendors. So for example, Azure here, you can still have your DCs in the cloud, but rather than connecting through RDP, you're connecting through a Bastion service. So it's a filtered firewall service that protects against those common types of attacks. Another mistake that often people make is when they go hybrid, they automatically assume that now we've gone hybrid, our workstations have to remain connected to Active Directory. Absolutely not. Those machines can do a direct join to either Azure AD. So you've got a number of options. You could do a hybrid Azure Active Directory join, but the problem with hybrid is essentially you're still being authenticated by on-premises Active Directory. And a lot of people consider this to be backward facing. You're looking backwards here. And also, you're very limited to what you can do with hybrid PCs. Yes, you can manage them a little bit in, conditional access, but you can't really do that much with them. Whereas forward facing, you want to Azure AD join these devices, because these devices can be directly managed in Azure Active Directory. They can be managed in Intune and so on. You can have multi-factor authentication, all right? And it's completely backward compatible, all right? This is, for me, definitely the way to go. Group policy. So a lot of people out there say, oh, no, we've got to keep our PCs on premises because we need that sysvol service in Active Directory that provides group policy. Absolutely not. All right. So again, we have group policy analytics. You can export your ADMX templates from on-premises and you can import them now into Intune seamlessly. Okay. And it just works. It's awesome. Okay. Azure AD Connect, again, make sure that you're running the latest version of Azure AD Connect if you're using it. So you can see that version 1 was on Windows Server 2012 and earlier. Again, potential nightmare when it came to security. Nowadays, 2019 and above is the minimum requirement for Azure AD Connect. Okay, so again, TLS, it's been improved. Security is much better. So definitely, this is the way to go. One thing that you can do is, rather than going with, let's say, Azure AD Connect, there is a lighter option that you might want to consider. All right, and that lighter option is, I'll just play this little demo. The lighter option is that you can use something called Azure AD Connect Cloud Sync. And Cloud Sync essentially is an agent. So here on my Active Directory domain controller, one of the first things that you need to do, of course, is make sure that that recycle bin is enabled, right? The reason you do that is because if you delete an object on premises and it deletes it in the cloud, if you need to recover it, it will match. Otherwise, it's a potential nightmare. All right. So the next thing that we then do is we go into the Azure portal. And in the Azure portal here, you can provision either by using Azure AD Connect, which is the full-blown tool, or you might actually consider using the Cloud Sync tool. So the Cloud Sync tool is super easy to use. I can go in and simply download an agent. And if you've got multiple servers, of course, for redundancy purposes, I can easily go in here and I can download them as well. All right. So I just simply accept the terms and conditions here. It downloads the agent. It's very, very lightweight, very similar, by the way, to the app proxy agent as well. So I simply download the package. Just give this a second. And then what I'm going to do is we are going to run it. So basically, it's just essentially it's a connector. So just give this a second. Okay, so I'm just going to click on next. And it says, yeah, I want to go ahead and I want to set this up now. So I've accepted it. I'm now going to run the little wizard. So if I just click on next, and I just need to authenticate, okay? And here I'll just put in my credentials. Okay, so I just paste in my credentials here and click on next. And again, my password or my MFA, whatever you're using here. So I now need to authenticate. It will say, okay, I need to put in my domain credentials here. So in this case, I just put in my domain admin credentials. And again, that's it. That's really it. So it's detected the domain. I simply add that in. Now, if you've got multiple forests, you would just do the same thing and just add those in here. Okay, so now that I've done that, I'm going to click on next and configure. So that just, you can see it's creating a group managed service account. So a very, very low level permission account to manage it. So no admin privileges for the agent. All right. So that's it. That's it configured. There's no configuration there. So now what we do is I'm just going to click on close here, and then we'll go back to the portal. Yes, come on, Mary, click onto it. You have to forgive my assistant. She's a little bit slow. Come on, click it. Yes, okay, good. Yes, okay, so again, just takes a couple of seconds. I go back into the portal now. Okay, I'm just going to refresh the screen, and now you can see that the agent has, it's been set up. So now what we do is we now do a configuration. So do you want to enable password hash sync? Now, this is unfortunately the only option at the moment. You cannot do PTA at the moment, but it is planned eventually that you will be able to do that. Okay, so I'm going to do that. It runs it through. And now it says, okay, what do you want to sync? So do you want to sync everything? Do you want to sync every user, selected security groups, or selected organizational units? So if you want to bring everything in, you can do so. Do you want to add in on customize any additional attributes? So if you've got, do you want to map the attributes? Do you want to match them from what's on premises to what's in the cloud? And you can do this for users, groups, and contacts. All righty. Please note devices, again, you can't manage devices. That you can only do that in Azure AD Connect at the moment. Now you can validate the user account. So you would just put in a admin email in here. So if I just pop that in, and again, if there were any kind of issues, any service issues, it will just send a service email. So, you know, if you've got like a help desk or something like that. So am I ready to deploy? Yes, I am. So I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to say, yes, I want to configure that. Okay, so off it goes. It will now start to deploy that. All right. So now that I've done that, I can simply go in at any time. I can manage it. You can see that I've got a green light and the status is healthy. Again, I don't need to go into PowerShell. You can, of course, there is still PowerShell commandlets, but here I can go in and I can see the current sync status and everything looks good. Please note that there are also, again, I can go back in anytime and reconfigure it. I can resync it if I want to, and there are also log files that I can use as well. So again, you can resync whenever you want. So if I go back into the portal, just to say that there are also some really nice logs. So again, here we go. So you can see my users have started to sync through now. So Abby has come through. Yeah. The only thing, of course, is that the accounts are disabled and they're not licensed. So you would need to go ahead and license these accounts and then enable them. All right. So once you've enabled them, everything's pretty good. I can then go in, of course, to the back to the logs. You also get a log, of course. So a regular sync log, you can go back in and you can explore that anytime. Okay. All right. So that pretty simple, really. Okay. That's the idea. So Reducing your organization's attack surface. What can I do? So Microsoft's Zero Trust. Yes. So again, identity, secure your endpoints, secure your data, your apps, your infrastructure, your network. Okay. It's a new world. All right. And you need to be able to secure all of these things. I've spoken about this recently. Conditional access is an additional layer of security. It monitors thousands of signals every day. And basically, you can set conditions on those signals, and you can then decide whether you're going to block access, allow it, limit it, require MFA, or what have you. Microsoft, of course, released that continuous access evaluation protocol. And what this does is it's constantly monitoring users, devices, and apps. And if anything changes, if something doesn't look right, the user will then be re-prompted to re-authenticate. So it doesn't lock the user out, it prompts them to re-authenticate. So it's absolutely superb. All right. You can also, again, protect passwords. So there is a password protection tool if you must use passwords. So you can go into password protection, and you can write that back to on-premises, of course, as well. My final piece of advice is, again, if you are going to have backups of your data, of course, the difference between a backup and an archive. A backup is for disaster recovery. So this is your server infrastructure, restoring your server infrastructure. A archive is for compliance reasons. So you need to archive all your important data, for example. So you need to make sure that everything is air-gapped. Don't have on-premises backups. Always have at least one off-site backup, and it should be what we call immutable. Again, you can, as well as making your data immutable, you can also use things like data loss prevention policies, retention policies, labeling, and classification as well. Keep off-site backups of your data so that if you are attacked, and your servers are brought down, your backups are brought down, you can then restore from that offsite backup. So there you have it. So are you prepared to be in this hybrid world? Do you have those solid defenses in place to defend yourself against ransomware and hacker attacks? I really hope that you enjoyed this session and that you got a lot out of it. Remember, if you've not subscribed, bump that subscribe button up there, ring that bell, and come on board and join our community. Hey, and if you have enjoyed the video, please go ahead, bump the like button. It really does make a difference to my channel. That's it for today. Thanks so much for joining me. I'll see you next time. Take care. Hey, thanks so much for dropping by today. Here's a couple of videos that you may enjoy, and while you're here, go ahead, click on the subscribe button and you won't miss out.